I hope you realize by now that kicks are sometimes literally 40% of your whole track. It would be cool to know how to perfect them, right? Welcome to mixelite.com, and in this video we are going to uncover how to master kick sample selection, how to shape them to always fit your track, and I will give you some secret mixing tricks to put all of your friends on their knees begging for tips. So kick is technically made out of three parts: your transient that will be cutting through your mix, then your body that will be the most audible basically, and then the tail and this low end that kick creates. Each of these parts live in three different spectrums: transients in highs, body in mids, and tails in the sub. And now knowing that, how do you actually choose the best one for your track? And I could go on a rant here that, for example, trap kicks usually don't have this very rich highs and have really distorted body. And for example, ADM kicks will have much higher transient and less distorted body. But I believe that the best way to learn is with your hands on. That's why I've made for you a free pack with 50 best kick samples that you cannot go wrong with. Check the link below for that, because there are no specific rules I can give you to follow when choosing your kick drum. It's best to just listen for the differences over here. And later in the video, I will show you a 100% definitely legal technique how to always get proven to work kicks. The next step is correcting the length of your kick depending on the style of your bass. It's not a kick and bass mixing tutorial. We focus only on kick, but if you have a long sustained bass, then a shorter kick will work better. If you have a short plucky bass, you can safely use a longer kick. A rule of thumb is always to make sure that you don't overlap the tail of your kick with your bass, but we'll cover that more in depth in a second. Now, even though you use a cool sample, you can always layer a lot of cool stuff over it, like some organic recording. You can always shorten that, or some vinyl noise, for example, and shape the envelope like that. You can always also just layer another kick's transient, but make sure to not layer any bass sounds. Another cool technique is also taking a transient just like that and reversing it and placing it just before your actual kick starts. Just a tiny amount like that will definitely make your kick pop out a little bit more. Of course, you can also layer a reverse body of another kick, but you should not use it on every single kick hit in your track. Now, the next most important thing is choosing the correct volume level, and how loud your kick should be depends on the style. I could tell you that, oh, your kick should peak at -6 dB, but peak level is way different than the actual perceived loudness, and that's actually what matters. There's LUFS that is actually metering the perceived loudness, and well, I could tell you, oh, okay, your kicks should peak at -7 or 8 LUFS, but there are a few things that make it really hard. In ADM, for example, the kick dominates, right? That's where you will put your kick really loud. But in style like rock, it would not be that loud, right? I would normally tell you to choose a reference track, but in that case, it's also not the best idea, since the reference tracks will be mastered already, meaning that the kick will be squashed together with everything else in terms of peaks, right? The best and fastest way to master your kick drums is just to first trust your gut, and second, seek feedback. That's actually why we created Mix Elite membership, where one of the perks is that you get unlimited one-on-one in-depth feedback from our team personally. So for example, you could render a part of your track 5 times with 5 different kicks, and we can tell you which one is best, or if it's too loud, what to fix, etc. So there's literally no way you don't start produce professional tracks. Let's try that together. For example, here, yeah, in that case, we are actually peaking at -6 dB. And we can bring it up. Or down. Yeah, as you can see, if we put it +3 dB, yeah, well, it's too loud, but if we put on some maximizing, sounds pretty balanced already. And if I put it -6 dB down, it's perfectly fine as well. So as you can see, you have a ton of room for quote error, unless you don't get right the next two steps we are going to talk about. No matter how perfect your kick would not be, you always need to fit it into the tonal balance of your track. So in your sub area, this is your deep rumble part. It adds power, but can muddy up your mix, especially if your room is not treated well. Then we have bass, which will be from about 80 to 150, 200 hertz. And this is basically where most of your low body of your kick lives in. This area is really important if you want your kick to be felt in your chest. This you will feel more sort of in your stomach, right? Then you have your low mids. It's more sort of like higher body of your kick. If you have too much of it, it will overpower these two, right? So sometimes you want to keep this part minimal. Then you have your mids. This is where the transients will start to really shine. Some kicks you will find that have really minimal amount of mids, especially when there's a lot of stuff going on in other elements in this area over here. But if you're working on a tech house track, for example, or a track that needs gritty kick, this is where your kick should shine. This is where this grittiness actually starts. You should have pretty rich amount of mids to make your kick really pop out and fill the mids, which are the meat of your track. And then we have a really important part, which are high mids, and this is actually the definition of your kick cutting through the mix. We'll also have those trebles that some people really like to boost to add some kind of air to the kick. This is also something you will see people do to shape their kicks. So we could definitely bring up a little bit more of the sub bass. Then we have a little bit of the mud over here. That's why you can cut it slightly. You don't want to make those changes while listening to only the kick. You always want to make sure it fits the whole mix. That's the purpose of this EQ over here, right? For example, with this boost in the mids, it actually sounds a little bit better, but by itself, not necessarily, right? In this track over here, we actually don't have a lot of stuff going on in the mids, and we have a ton of those mids here in this kick. That makes the kick actually pop out a little bit too much, right? That's why, for example, in this specific scenario, even though the kick sounds actually super nice, we would like to bring down those mids over here, and that will shape the kick to fit it much better. Listen to that. Another EQ technique is to carve out from the bass the resonant frequencies that our kick has. So our kick hits at around, as you can see, C2, something like that, right? And we can just take this frequency, which as you can see is at about 62 Hertz. Let's try to listen to it. If you feel like your kick lacks this deep rumble part, this is when you can actually boost it like 2 or 3 dB. And then we go to our bass and make the exact same bell shape, but into the opposite direction. This is really small difference, but I actually prefer how it sounds with these EQ bells applied. Another nasty fact about your kick is that sometimes you will have this bleeding and a lot of unwanted sub bass from your kicks. These kicks are actually designed to go from high pitch to low pitch. That's when it can bleed this unwanted sub bass. And if you look at our red waveform, this is our kick over here, right? So it's usually not a big deal, but it can make a difference. How you can deal with this is of course applying a low cut on your kick drum, as you can see here. If I turn it on, it starts to go out, and if we go to about here, we have no bleeding at all. So we basically have cut everything below this resonance frequencies that we have over here. Now, if you do it like this without any linear phase turned on, you might have some unwanted artifacts and actually make your kick sound really weak. That's why actually the safest way is simply to change it from low cut to low shelf. As you can see, we have no bleeding at all. It will also give you more headroom and will clean up the very lows, which matter a lot in club scenarios especially. Now, one of the biggest reasons for great kick drums is compression. However, I never actually compress kick drums in a normal way that you might think about. When using compression on a kick drum, especially if you're working with electronic music, right? So trap, EDM, pop, whatever, where we have an actual electronic kick without any room sounds and without any ambiances under it, you don't actually have to really compress your kick, because in like instant attack scenario, you would just pretty much just lower the volume of your kick, which you can just do with your volume. And if you want to like play with the tail, you can definitely also do it with just your kick sample itself, right? And yes, you could actually go and compress your kick so that, for example, your low end over here is not higher in peak than the transient over here, right? But let's listen what actually happens when I start to lower the threshold. You actually start to just hear this attack, right? So even though we've set the attack to the lowest amount, you can actually still hear it, right? Also, the release settings need to be short enough so that the compressor stops working before the next kick starts, because that could also lower your transients, right? To tackle this click, turn on look ahead and increase it until you actually don't hear any of those clicks. But overall, you will never use a compressor like that. A compressor just like that, you would rather use on your low-end bass to lower the dynamic range between your kick and the bass, to glue them a little bit more together. Yeah, you could do it also on the kick itself, but that really depends on how you tend to produce. Most of the time, as I said, simply leveling your kick right should make it sound really great already. Compressor is extremely useful when you want your kick to cut through the mix. And this is a really interesting concept. What we want to do is decrease the threshold and increase the ratio and start increasing the attack. At about 20 to 40 milliseconds, you'll start to hear this exact transient coming through. That's exactly when you can start increasing the dry gain. To make this kick pop through your mix much more. You can do it with every compressor you use. You can just increase the output and then play with the mix.
Pretty face, I can't live without your la 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 la. I can't live without your la 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 la. I can't live without your la 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 la.
Very similar thing you can get with any transient shaper. For example, this is a free one. What I suggest you to play around with is multiband compression on your kick with simple two bands. One will cover just your very low end. So two just about 150 depending on your kick drum, and the other band will tackle the transients. That will also allow you to shape your kick however you want. With simple compressor, we were limited by the volume of whole frequency spectrum of your kick. And here we can just divide that. And for example, if you want to bring the transient a little bit higher and flatten a little bit of the low, you can exactly do this with a multiband compressor just like that. So let's see what's happening when we start to compress it. right? So in this extreme example, you could see that we had only our transient come through, right? So that works very, very similar to the transient shaping and compressor with a longer attack, but actually is a little bit more accurate. And in case you also want to shape the higher end of your kick, you can do so maybe even with 3 bands. So you have a separate band for your body of your kick and separate band for your transients. And now coming to the most important part of making your kick shine in your mix is the fact that everything in music is relative. You will say, oh, this kick is really loud, which is not true at all. It's actually that everything else in that moment when the kick plays is really quiet. And the easiest way is just to listen.
Can't live without your la 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 la.
Right away, kick doesn't sound that loud at all. So you need to sidechain your kick to your melodies and bass. And I have a couple of tutorials on how to sidechain, so I will not get in depth into this. What I wanted to show you is fusion between multiband compression that we just did and sidechaining. So in Pro MB, of course, you just need to sidechain and set the correct sidechain over here. And in the band, just change it to external. If we just do a normal sidechain like that, so we are losing also this nice transients from the bass, and we don't necessarily want to lose them, right? So in that case, we can do the exact same thing we've done with the kick previously, and that is compressing your bass with the signal of the kick only on the low end. As you can see, it works here without a sidechain, which is actually also cool, but we can make it work just a little bit in the transients. And cool thing about that over here is that you can actually EQ out the sidechain signal, so we are not triggering the compression with the whole band over here from the kick, which, as you know, has a ton of the slow end. We can move it a little bit to the right, and that will make the signal a lot shorter. If you don't have Pro MB, you can of course just play with the release and you should be fine without needing to EQ out the signal. It's also possible to just send the signal only and EQ it out and then set it back again to your sidechain compression. You can do everything in your stock plugins in FL or Ableton. By the way, all the templates we use in all of our videos you can get completely for free just for trying out our Mix Elite membership, when you get access to all of our courses, weekly live coaching calls, unlimited one-on-one feedback on your music and mixes, and all the templates you can keep forever. When it comes to effects on your kick drum, you can definitely do it. For example, with reverb, you can add some kind of room effect, and it can actually help kick to sit better in the mix, depending on the track. We always want to make sure that we cut out all the low end from the reverb. That's why you could make the reverb in a separate mixer track and send the kick to your reverb. Make sure then the reverb is 100% wet. Just be mindful about this area over here. It can muddy up your mix really, really quick. You could also make it longer, but then make sure to sidechain the reverb with the dry signal of your kick. So in the moment when the kick plays, there's no reverb at all. Adding reverb and delay to your kick is actually how you make those techno rumbles. A cool pro tip here is actually that you can change how your kick sounds with the pogo knob here. Instead of pitching it up or down, you can just use this knob to give you really cool results. And distortion, of course, really powerful tool, especially if you have fairly clean kick and want to add this harmonic content to make your kick fill out a little bit more of your body and of your transients. It actually works wonders when you group your kick and clap together and then distort them together. Creates this really nice, gritty, harmonic effect. So in that case, you can actually hear that bass has a lot of those 200 to 400 hertz that actually is bad in our kick. And if we would not distort our kick, sounds perfectly fine, but if we add a little bit of distortion, we kind of make the kick a little bit more similar to the bass in terms of those frequencies over here.
Attention please.
And my secret technique on how to drastically improve the quality of your kicks, you just find a track in your style that you really love. So what you want to do is separate the kick from the track, just like that. In Ableton, you will be able to easily zoom in. In FL, you might need to increase the time-based PPQ. And then with the slip tool, you just want to make sure you're starting somewhere where the kick starts. It should look something like this. Open any multi-band compressor and then just solo the bands one by one and record how each one of those sound. So we can do it in FL really easily like this. We record and start playing the song with lows soloed, mids, and highs. And then we'll get 3 perfect samples that we can now simply shape just like that. So then we have something like this. And always, if you want, you can take another kick and crossfade it with the low signal of your extracted kick. So it will look something like that. And you can always make sure that the phase is correct. You can save this kick or go to your library and just search for something similar. Or even you can get rid of the low end and just layer the mid and highs with another kick sample. Now, knowing how to mix your kick is great, but to get the most out of it, you need to watch this video next.